week or 2 weeks ago that we're 36th worldwide for business and freedom. That's behind every industrialized nation and then a whole group of third world countries. The punitization of energy and Russia and Putin and how he has been working for 10 years to corner the energy market, Putin's true motivation behind the Ukraine and what he thinks Putin's endgame is. So we're joined by Doug Casey. Doug, you got a long bio, but for folks that don't know who you are, even though you're not an arrogant person, spend a few minutes telling folks about Doug Casey, and then where do you want to start first?
Well, Alex, pleasure to be here. Thank you. To introduce myself, I guess my first book came on the scene in 1978. It was called The International Man, How to Make the Most of Your Personal Freedom and Financial Opportunity Around the World. And that book sold very well internationally, but it was the largest selling book in the history of Rhodesia, which is a record which is never going to be beaten since Rhodesia doesn't exist anymore. At the time, there were 250,000 Europeans, or people of European background and descent living in Rhodesia. Now there are probably about 2,000, maybe. Anyway, my second book was Crisis Investing, and that was number one on the New York Times list for 18 weeks. It was on the list for 39 weeks. And it came out in 1979, and it talked about your profits and opportunities in the coming Great Depression. And we almost had that depression back in the early 80s, when you'll recall interest rates, even on government paper, was 15, 16%. So I've been doing this since then. I've been to 145 countries. I've lived in 10. And that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
So you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. And I want to talk to you about the currency controls, the capital controls. What you warned about back in 1979 in some place like Rhodesia, where they have 1,000,000% inflation and total hellhole now from a Garden of Eden, basically, according to folks I know that have lived there compared to what it is now. We can see the writing on the wall for America because you've seen this syndrome play out in country after country.
Well, what's happening is that the U.S. government, since the Greater Depression actually started in 2008, has created trillions of new currency units, trillions of new U.S. dollars. And right now, they're basically sitting in the big banks and insurance companies where they went to bail them out as they were failing back in 2007, 2008. But at some point, they're going to come out into the economy in force. Right now, the stock market and the bond markets are at all-time highs because of those newly created dollars. And people think that's a good thing. But it's going to come down to a retail level where the things that you need to live on start exploding upwards in price. And that's going to become a real problem, Alex, because when the currency loses value, you're disincentivized to save. And saving is how you become wealthy. And, of course, you could say this is why the U.S. as a whole is becoming poorer, and the middle class is being wiped out.
Again, once they also start accelerating spending, that only throws fuel on the fire. What is your gut? Kind of go back to your speech at Casey Research this last Saturday. Where does your gut tell you this country's going? We know it's going to collapse. That's what all the armored vehicles and martial law preparations are for. But I see this as a global meltdown that's coming. When do you think it's coming? Will it come slowly or quickly?
Well, I think we're on the edge of the precipice right now. And I say that with fear and trepidation because most of the 300 million people in this country want to produce more than they consume and set aside the difference. They understand intuitively that that's how you keep the wolf from the door. But that said, I think we're in very, very big trouble at this point. Actually, when we go back historically, I'd say that the United States peaked back in the mid-50s. That's when we were in relative terms much, much more powerful than all the rest of the world put together. The value of our stock and bond markets were 3 or 4 times the rest of the world put together. We produce 90% of the world's cars, 90% of the world's airplanes. All of this has changed. We've come a long way from producing the 1959 Cadillac convertible to making little econoboxes, because that's all people can afford to drive.
It was all swindled away.
It has been. It's all we have is receipts for the financing of the warfare state and the welfare state. Two things that are antithetical to the idea of America. In fact, Alex, I don't even say I live in America anymore, because America was a fantastic idea, a unique idea, a wonderful idea, but it's vanished. And now we just live in the United States, which is really just another of 200 other nation states that cover the face of the globe like a skin cancer at this point. And there's really not much difference between the U.S. and other countries, sad to say. In fact, we're less free than a lot of other countries.
And all the university studies show that we're a police state, and it's getting worse fast. The establishment obviously thinks that they're going to convert into a pure tyranny as if that's some desirable destination.
Well, that's right, and it's why I recommend that people diversify themselves internationally and diversify politically, because your biggest danger today, as big as the economic and financial dangers are, and they're huge, your biggest danger is a political danger, what the state can do to you. So it's important that you diversify so that all your assets aren't under the control of your own government, and you yourself physically have a crib that you can go to if this place turns into 1933 in Germany, or 1917 in Russia, or 1973 in Vietnam, or 1959 in Cuba. This happens all over the world, in all countries across space.
And we know the Cloward and Piven socialists are on record saying, yeah, we engineered it, and when it comes down, we're going to sell total socialism as the answer. Can you imagine the hellhole America will be, Doug? Well,
actually, the average American at this point no longer believes in capitalism and free markets and free speech. He really believes in bread and circuses.
That's right. Doug, stay there. I want to come back to you and ask how you were such a visionary. What woke you up so early? We're talking to the trailblazer. Stay with us. We'll be getting into the Putinization of energy with Doug Casey coming up. But, Doug, the Ministry of Defense, the Department of Defense, all of them in the last 5 years have put out reports saying collapse is inevitable. The question is when. There's over 2 quadrillion in derivatives out there. That's even in the Wall Street Journal. For folks that don't know, that's probably 100 times all the real assets in the world. We're going the way of Rhodesia, where you lived. We're going the way of the Weimar Republic, undoubtedly. And you say we're on the precipice. Government is running around like fire ants that have been disturbed, gearing up for what it looks like the apocalypse or something. They are setting up the new currency and capital controls. They tripled the price to renounce your U.S. citizenship. How did you, way back in 1978, with the International Man, envision all of this? I mean, what woke up Doug Casey?
Well, at some point, I figured out that the best survival strategy for a human being is not to act like a plant. And I'm afraid that most people, especially most Americans, because we've lived in a charmed life. We've lived a charmed life. It's like we've won the cosmic lottery being born in the United States during the 20th century. But things change. And as a survival strategy, you want to be air mobile. You want to be able to go anywhere and do anything to take advantage of opportunities wherever they may be. But most people have kind of a medieval peasant mindset where they're afraid of anything that's over the next valley because perhaps the media told them that there might be dragons, so they should be afraid. So I've always had an expansive, outward-looking world my oyster. So it's a psychological attitude, first and foremost, Alex.
You've lived in 10 countries, and I want to spend some more time on that coming up. And you've got a project, I know, going on in South America right now that I want to see sometime. But looking specifically at your prognosis as a forecaster economically, why you say we're on the precipice?
Well, it's because in the real world, actions have consequences, cause has effect. And from being a free market society when this country started and being a beacon for the rest of the world for free minds and free markets, over time we've become encrusted with this barnacle infestation of regulatory agencies that stop things from happening and impose huge costs on anything that does happen. So that at this point, we're now an extremely highly regulated, extremely highly taxed society that's about to suffer from catastrophic inflation, which is going to wipe out people's savings. So a collapse, I'm sad to say, is inevitable. Now, life will go on. I've been in countries when they've collapsed, and the real wealth, or a lot of it, still exists. It just changes ownership, but it's very unpleasant and inconvenient and dangerous for the people that are there while it's happening.
And now we see Homeland Security announcing that they're going to be tackling climate criminals and that they're going to be watching the Tea Party. Why do you think the Homeland Security's made the libertarian movement or anarchic capitalist the number one enemy?
Well, that is interesting because, Republicans say they believe in the free market, but that's a lie. They just don't believe in social freedom. And Democrats say they believe in social freedom, but that's a lie. But they definitely don't believe in economic freedom. So why do these people hate the libertarians who believe in both economic and social freedom? Well, I guess it's because we really don't believe that the government serves very much of a useful purpose, unlike the Republicans and the Democrats. So I think that's why they really hate the libertarians. But you mentioned climate change before. I've been an amateur geologist for most of my life. When I was a kid, first thing I wanted to be was a paleontologist, dinosaurs, and that led me to being wanting to be a geologist. I read everything about that.
Hold on, I want to get your take, Doug. Long segment coming up. Doug Casey, CaseyResearch.com, amazing website. Everybody should check it out for all the intel and reports and on where he thinks the safest, best places are to leave if you are exiting the former United States, the former America, now a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. So stay with us. We're going to talk to Doug Casey straight ahead. I'm Alex Jones. My friends, we are broadcasting worldwide. We'll be back live this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And guess who's going to be here, speaking of the International Man for the next 2 weeks? One of the main editors and main researchers and just incredible journalist, Paul Joseph Watson, is going to be touching down in Austin, Texas on direct flight from the UK right into Austin, Texas in the next 2 hours. So Paul Watson will be with us this Sunday, and he's going to be co-hosting some with yours truly here next week. We're going back to the author of The International Man and so many other New York Times bestsellers, and that's Doug Casey. Before I go any further, we do not fund ourselves, as you know, with government stimulus money like MSNBC or $450 million of taxpayer money like NPR and Rockefeller grants every year. I go out and find super high-quality products and try to sell them at the lowest price where we make enough profit to have the reporters, the news writers, the investigative journalists, the equipment, the crew, the video people, the radio producers, everything. That's what we do. And we fund ourselves with super high-quality organic coffee from the high mountains of Mexico and Chiapas. We fund ourselves with Survival Shield, the proprietary super iodine X2. with the lung cleanse, with the oxy powder that flushes out your guts, with super female vitality, with the fluoride shield, chelating, detoxifier, all of it, AcuPower for the eyes. We go to the top formulators and say we want over the top, super organic, highest quality, joke level. By joke level, we go to major manufacturers, major laboratories, some of the biggest in the country. Say in the case of AcuPower. And we say, this is what we want. And they go, wow, that's an incredible formula. No one's ever had one that strong and this concentrated for anywhere near this price. I mean, just give you an example. Most major groups, even quote, have quality stuff. Let's say it's $50, $100 for a bottle. It's got $10 of product in it. Something's $30, it's got $2 of product in it. If we got something that's, say, $40, it's got $20 of product in it. If something's $130, like DNA Force, one ingredient's $40 of it in each bottle. And that's one of ingredient of a whole bunch. That's the kind of stuff we've got in DNA Force and the rest of it. Go read about it, find out about what it does to the cells, to the nerves, the regeneration, all of it. This is the patented, proven stuff with an over-the-top formula nutraceutical. Similar concoctions are $300 to $600. Ours is $130. It's a flagship product. It's very expensive. But even at the opening price, when it first came out, it sold out in 4 hours. We got it a little bit more this time. It's set to sell out by tomorrow, and that's being conservative, maybe even tonight. But we do get more in a few weeks. DNA Force. And your purchase, it's a big bottle, jam-packed with a whole bunch of the caplets, funds this operation, the very tip of the spear. So we've got colloidal silver for $19.95, super high quality. It's the same laboratory that produces it for Whole Foods, produces it for us, and ours is less than theirs. So just to give you an example, just the highest quality, lowest price. That's how I want to dominate the market and really win-win-win. Fund our operation, give you super high-quality products that I personally use, my family uses, and then you'll reorder because it's so good. So I want to thank you all for your support, InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. 888-253-3139. And we are about to sell out of Lung Cleanse and Silver Bullet yet again. And we don't just say that as a promotional thing. That's a great way to sell something, is artificial scarcity. You see the stuff sell out for months all the time. So Silver Bullet, Lung Cleanse, X2, we got plenty of that, but that's our main seller. InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. And InfoWarsLife.com is a subgroup of InfoWarsStore.com, where you got the Molon Labe, come and take it, belt buckles and T-shirts and ball caps and films and books, high-quality water filters, the best non-GMO seeds, the lowest prices. Go check it. I mean, we get in trouble sometimes with people that supply us. They go, hey, your contract says you can't sell for lower than this. Our other distributors are getting mad, and I go, hey, wait a minute. I added the proviso. I can have sales from time to time. I mean, we really are capitalist, folks. So you get a great deal. You support a hardcore organization that tells the truth. There's a platform for so many others that have come before us and are up-and-comers as well. InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com, or 888-253-3139. Now, back to Doug Casey of CaseyResearch.com. Doug, look, you're a polite guy. You keep pausing for me to talk, but that's not good with somebody like me whose brain races like a insane ferret, hypomanic. You've got the floor. Talk about where you see the world going, what you personally are doing down in South America. I want to get into how the government is clamping down on financial freedoms. I want to get into the Putinization of energy. And your view of Putin and what's happening. Doug Casey, you've got the floor.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Well, some years ago, some friends and I decided that it would be wise to diversify outside of the U.S. so that you have a backup system. There's a plan B. So we went to northwest Argentina, and we bought a lot of land. As a matter of fact, we bought about 200,000 acres of land down there. But on a small portion of that, outside of a town of 10,000 people, in the middle of a grape-growing region where we're surrounded by thousands and thousands of acres of vineyards, There's this little town of 10,000 people, and we built what we think is the best resort in the world on that land. We have our own grapes. We have an 18-hole golf course. I'm not old enough to play golf, but I know a lot of people like to play it. Unfortunately, I'm getting too old to play polo, which I played for years. And that may sound strange to some of your listeners that I'm recommending polo, but Winston Churchill said that a polo handicap is better than any passport. And he's absolutely right. Polo is the most fun you can have with your clothes on, quite frankly. And it's something that if you're in a position to teach your children or your grandchildren how to play that game, you're doing them a gigantic favor. Anyway, we have a polo field down there and offer polo lessons. We have
not just because it's fun, because it's an elite game, and that's how you can really get into some interesting circles.
That's exactly correct. But it's not a poofter game either. It's we call it horse hockey, and it's really playing hockey, which is a tough game, except you're doing it on horseback, which makes it even tougher. So it's a very martial arts type of a game. When it originated in Afghanistan, except there they play it with dead goats still.
Or with people's heads.
That's right. We use a stick and ball. It's lower cost and I think more fun. But anyway, that's one of the things we do down there, something that people can learn to do. We have a world-class gymnasium and every bell and whistle and toy that you can want. And interestingly, although most countries in the world, this will surprise a lot of people to hear this, although most countries in the world are now more expensive than the U.S., to get the same thing as you get here in the U.S., it'll cost you twice as much in Europe. But Argentina is one of the cheapest countries in the world, and the cost of living down there is probably about a third of what it is in the United States.
Tell folks about the resort if they want to look it up.
Well, it's called, they should go to La Est, L-A-E-S-T, stands for laestancia.com. So L-A-E-S-T, laest.com.
We'll put that on screen.
And it'll explain what we're doing down there. It's a place with a fantastic climate year-round. The government totally leaves you alone. It's very unregulated, very free, and very mellow with very interesting, successful entrepreneurs. I mean, our people don't come down there because their cost of living is a third of what it is in the U.S. They come down there for the company and the culture and the weather. So I'd like to advise people to take a look. So that's one thing that I'm doing, and I spend half of the year down there at this point. I'm following my own advice because your biggest risk today is a political risk. So you have to diversify financially and personally to avoid that political risk that the U.S. government is presenting.
And for those that don't know, they are really trying to make it hard to get out of the country. The borders are wide open, but it's very hard to get your money or anything else out of the country, even after tax money. They're acting like, no, that belongs to them.
Well, that's absolutely correct. It used to be that there was no limits, no reporting, taking any amount of money out of the U.S. that you wanted to. If you had a foreign bank account, you didn't even have to report it in the old days. But now, most foreign banks and brokers won't even take your money if you're an American citizen because it's too risky and too costly for them. So, in effect, Americans are now trapped like lobsters here in the U.S. So, and it's getting tougher every day. So you've got to act now while the door is still open. And I'm urging people to do that because when things fall apart here in the U.S., the people who are going to be able to put it back together are the ones that have preserved capital from outside the U.S., and they'll be able to come back into the U.S.
That's right, because the big mega rich that are anti-free market, they admit they can't wait till the collapse happens because they're going to sell socialism as the answer and further wreck things under Cloward and Piven. I mean, there's got to be some way to try to stop them. Do you think there's any way to stop them, Doug?
The prognosis is not good. I suggest that charity begins at home. And the most important thing for every individual in this country
is take care of yourself.
Exactly. Because you can't take care of other people if you haven't first taken care of yourself. And the problem is that so many people that believe in the free market and libertarianism don't have the money, and they're not putting the theory into practice. And people that believe in capitalism and freedom, well, we should all be wealthy because wealth gives you power, and we're going to need power to get rid of the bad guys. So I want to see everybody become wealthy. I'd like to see people do intelligent things with their money in this very dangerous financial environment we're in so that they can weather the storm and come out the other side, not just keeping what they have, but hopefully with more than they went into it.
And I know over at kcresearch.com, that's some of the advice you give. What are some of the basic strategies for folks out there that you would recommend?
Well, let's keep it simple. From an investment point of view, at this point, the stock market is meaningfully overpriced. It could go higher because with the trillions of new dollars that continue to be created, a lot of it's going to go into the stock market. The stock market could go higher, but it's risky, very risky. I don't recommend it. The bond market is a triple threat to your capital today. Interest rates are at all-time lows. Bonds are at all-time highs. If you own any, you should sell them tomorrow morning. That's not good. Real estate, well, at least it's real wealth, but real estate taxes are going up because it's time to tax to eat the rich, to tax the wealthy, and that means people that own real estate. Plus, the problem with real estate is that it floats on a sea of borrowed money, and when interest rates inevitably go up, that's not going to be good for real estate. So what are we left with? I've ruled out stocks, bonds, and real estate. So what can you do? Hold cash? You're getting zero interest rate, but inflation in real terms is running someplace between 5 and 8% per year, even now. I suggest that people build a significant position in physical gold and silver. Why? Because they've historically always been money, and they're the only financial assets that aren't simultaneously somebody else's liability. You can have it as real wealth in your hand, as international currency. So
and there were articles out just last week.
Every month.
Sure, just last week, I think it was in the London Guardian or the Telegraph, that there was a 240-something% increase in elites buying gold bars in just the last 6 months, while the very same elites tell the public don't get into gold and silver.
You're absolutely right, because in an unstable situation like we are right now, you don't want to be holding paper, especially the unsecured liabilities of the U.S. government, which is itself bankrupt at this point. So it boils down to buying gold and silver, the physical metals in your own possession. Going beyond that, you should diversify your assets internationally, so it's not all in one political bailiwick here in the U.S. The third stool of the tripod, if you would, is that they're going to create other bubbles. They've created a gigantic bond bubble we're in now. We're in a stock market bubble. The real estate bubble broke back in 2008. They're building another one. But the key is this, is that they're going to be creating other bubbles like that, and it's possible to take advantage of these bubbles.
Exactly. Invest in the bubble early.
Exactly correct. So there are situations out there. Some are only available for, let's say, sophisticated investors. Like, for instance, I would short Japanese bonds denominated in yen, because as bad as things are here in the U.S., they're actually going to be worse in Japan. So that's a possibility. An easier thing is Mining stocks. Mining is a terrible business. I can explain why it's a terrible business, but mining stocks are very, very depressed right now. And eventually, when gold and silver explode upward in price out of both fear and greed, there's going to be a panic into these mining stocks, which have teeny-weeny market caps. All the mining stocks in the world are only worth about a quarter of what Apple alone is worth, to give you an idea of how small that market is.
Unbelievable. Stay there. Absolutely undervalued. No doubt about that. Plus, things have to be retooled from time to time, and government's been suppressing mining, so it's got to make a comeback. We'll be right back. But look at these stories up at Infowars.com. Ukraine government officially introduces slavery with vague terms. And that's the same government that, of course, was financed by the West. But does that mean Putin's an angle? No, it just means there's a clash between different power blocks. Also, CIA admits to destroying Gary Webb's career with the country's largest newspapers. This is so important. I'm going to cover that in the next hour. FBI critics, tech giants Apple and Google for encrypting phones. So the FBI is criticizing them. Military to allow undocumented immigrants to serve. That's already been going on. They're now just announcing it. That's all up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. A lot of news in the next hour. Some very important special reports and your phone calls. I'll open the phones up at the bottom of the next hour. I'll have Mr. Casey with me 5 minutes in the next hour, CaseyResearch.com. I want to shift gears now because we're almost out of time with this short segment in the next. What are you getting at when you call it the Putinization of energy, and you say that it's a long-term strategy by Putin? What's your view of Putin and global power blocks?
Well, I'm not a supporter of any politicians anywhere. They're all out for themselves, and it's entirely possible that Putin is actually the richest man in the world at this point, with having taken control indirectly of Russian energy companies. He may be worth $80 billion. Now, all that being said, Putin is not a stupid man, and he is a thoughtful man. And the main thing that Russia has going for it today, well, there are other things. It's got a corporate income tax that maxes out at 13%, a personal income tax that maxes out at 10%. In some ways, shocking to say, Russia has become freer than the United States has. But all that said, energy is the big play in Russia today, and there's good reason to believe that they're going to become relatively stronger for that reason. Energy, the whole world runs on energy. The whole world runs on oil, and the Russians produce a lot of it. So, and internally, Russia is much more stable than any of these countries in the Middle East. What's happening today in the totally artificial countries of Syria and Iraq, I mean, those things were created out of whole cloth in the boardrooms of Europe, as was Jordan, for that matter, as was Israel. But Saudi Arabia itself is a gigantic accident waiting to happen. And I expect something on the order of the Islamic State to overthrow that corrupt Islamic theocracy. I mean, half of the people in Saudi Arabia are under 25 years old. Most of them are unemployed and unhappy. So the place is a gigantic time bomb. So Russia is in an excellent position to capitalize on the problems in the Middle East.
And so now the West is trying to checkmate, basically stealing their gas lines, which makes the West pirates.
Well, you know, this whole thing that's blowing up in the Ukraine, you've got to look at it the way a Martian would look at it. And
Hold on, Doug. Doug, do 5 more minutes with us. We got to have you back up on a routine basis. Doug Casey read his books years ago, got invited to speak at his event, and we tried to get him on before. But we finally got right to him in person, And so here he is. We'll be back. I'm Alex Jones. Third hour coming up. We were getting into the Putinization of energy. What he thinks Putin's strategy is. And he ended up saying, you have to look at things going on in the world like a Martian would. And I agree, politically, being an atheist, not what you want to believe, but what's really going on. So what is the strategy arming al-Qaeda, calling it ISIS to destabilize the Middle East? Well, that actually helps Russia in a way, but I guess overthrowing Syria, they think won't, to cut off their port to the Mediterranean, overthrow Ukraine, move NATO up to their borders, try to grab their gas pipelines and give it to Joe Biden's son, which they've done. Doug Casey, you were saying we have to look at this like a Martian.
Well, yes. As far as the thing in the Ukraine is concerned, the Ukraine, again, is an artificial country. Its borders have been liquid for hundreds of years. So it makes all the sense in the world that these two provinces, Donetsk and Lugansk, should become independent countries to create a borderland between Russia and the NATO powers. And I've got to say also that NATO is something that should have been disbanded when the Soviet Union fell apart. At this point, NATO is nothing but a provocation to the rest of the world. And it's really nothing but a giant bureaucracy that's going around looking for a fight. So as I look at the Ukraine situation, being as objective as I can, and speaking as an American, I've got to say I come down on Putin's side of this thing.
Because as a Martian looking at it, this area they've gone into has the Russian infrastructure. They've been there for hundreds of years. George Soros admits they overthrew Ukraine. Unelected government came in and attacked. I mean, you'd have to be a fascist to not side with the Russians. Right, exactly. And I've got to point out that the Russians aren't communists anymore. There are more communists in American universities than there are in Russia at this point. A lot of these people kind of learned their lesson after 70 years of the Soviet Union. They don't want any more of that nonsense. Most of the communists are here in the U.S. It's perverse. Yeah, sitting around on all the free market wealth they've pissed away, lecturing anyone that... I tell you, why do socialists want to destroy wealth? They have no idea. Like locusts, they destroy every country they run. Well, it's a psychological aberration. From an intellectual point of view, there's no argument that makes any sense for the defense of socialism. It's a psychological problem, not an intellectual problem. That's what we're dealing with. And socialists suffer from a spiritual disease that I would call envy. And envy says, I have what you want, but it's not good enough that I get it. I want to take it away from you so you can't have it either. It's a horrible, ugly psychological... Well, you know they've got studies in England and Canada showing that socialists are 6 times more likely to steal and lie. They're really just pirate criminals that hate everybody, don't know how to do anything. Yes, it's amazing that people use the word socialism and they treat it like a legitimate political system. It's really just the legalization of theft and barbarism. It's amazing to me. Yeah, it's a gang of nobodies getting together to go rob other people. So Michael Savage calls it a mental illness, and that's what it is. Yeah, it is. It's a bunch of nothing nobodies who are incapable of producing anything on their own and like to use the state as a method to steal things legally. And the average person out there just rolls over like a whipped dog and wets himself and accepts this. I know you're only in the U.S. another few weeks, Doug. Promise to come back on for another hour before you leave to talk about socialism itself. I'm looking forward to talking to you, Alex. That was Doug Casey, CaseyResearch.com. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com.